Post Shifters. Welcome back to another episode of the Post Shift Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Shawn Soole. I've had to cancel some podcast live streams and I had to jump in some other ones. It's been a little bit of a hectic couple of weeks for me. I can't still divulge why it's been a hectic couple of weeks, but it's just been busy with tying off some consultancy and the big project I've been alluding to the last little while. Just clicking some buttons as I always do because I'm a one-man show. Today, I'm really looking forward to this conversation with Christin Marvin. She is the author of Multi-Unit Mastery, which we're going to get into like multi-unit leadership, which I'm excited for. Hospitality Leaders Roadmap, which is an audiobook, which I am definitely downloading this afternoon and making sure that I listen to that on my walks. You know me and my love of audiobooks. I'm not a reader. I just can't concentrate. I can concentrate when I'm on my walk. And she's the host of the Restaurant Leadership Podcast. So she's a leadership strategist advisor. She works with owners and operators on how to do leadership. Because I think as an owner operator, it is extremely tough to expand on your leadership outside of one venue. When you got one venue, you can still have your finger in the pie. But what happens when you have 2 or 3 pies? And I'm envious of people who have really clicked this in. And one person that comes to mind is Jack McGarry from Dead Rabbit. Like Jack McGarry has got multiple venues in multiple cities. He's got multiple different concepts now. One in New Jersey that he recently opened. He's got Irish Exit in the train station. And just listening to him and hanging out with him when I was with Sean Fincher in Annapolis a couple of months ago, well, this time last year now, was really eye-opening. So it's really cool. And the cool thing is that, and I've said this before, usually you see people on my podcast and we've got a relationship in the past, but as the podcast gets bigger and more popular, I get a lot of recommendations from people to have on the show. And Kristen's one of those people that I actually haven't got much of a relationship outside of right here, right now. So if you love my raw conversations about everything, when you have a brand new guest on the show, it's always great. So that's my intro. Welcome, Christin. Thank you so much for joining me.
So excited to have wonderful conversation with you. I don't know how we don't know each other yet, but because it sounds like we speak the same language. So I'm excited that we're starting this journey and building this relationship today.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I'm really curious about like the books you've written and sort of the direction of that leadership, because as we were talking in the green room, I do think we have a very strong alignment on how we feel leadership should be in the hospitality industry. And as always, I always mention my father, who was ex-military. My military upbringing definitely influenced my leadership style, and it still does to a degree, but I've definitely mellowed and got a little softer in my touch when it comes to this next generation. So I love origin stories. I'm a big comic book fan. What's your origin story getting into the hospitality industry and then specializing in that leadership realm?
Yeah, I think like a lot of people that are probably listening to the show, I started cooking when I was 15 and my family's favorite Mexican restaurant. That was my first job. I'd go to school, I'd go play sports, and then I'd go cook for a little bit. And when I graduated high school, I moved to Colorado, and my mom called me and said, because she had just moved there, I found the coolest restaurant. And this was 1999, to give you a little bit of a date there. But she said, I found the coolest restaurant. The people are amazing. The food's incredible. You should absolutely come get a job here. And it was Outback Steakhouse. And I know, which everybody laughs today. So I learned how to serve and bartend there. And I'll tell you what, from moving from a really small town in the Midwest and being a really shy kid, moving into the industry, it opened up a completely different side of me. I became, social, and I loved the team dynamic and the competition that existed every single day. And the systems were incredible. I was 19 years old going, this training's amazing. They're testing me every day. I've got to know my shit. I learned how to sell things. It was just, that the staff was really close to each other. And of course there was this party atmosphere. So it was just an eye-opening world for me. I did that for a little bit. And then I wandered up the street one day to a 5-star 5-diamond hotel that was having a job fair. And I met the most charming Irishman who was a bar manager for us on our international student program. And from Dublin. And he was like, we're opening this cocktail bar. You should absolutely come be a part of this team. And I was like, oh, opening something for the first time? That sounds amazing. So I got a job there. I ended up working in the hotel while I was putting myself through college. And graduated from college and I had no idea what I wanted to do because I was looking at jobs and I was like, I love what I'm doing. I'm making great money. I don't care that I'm working nights and weekends and holidays. This is great. I'm having a blast every day. So I went to the food and beverage manager and said, how do I do this for the rest of my life? And he said, well, take our management training course. So I got that binder out of the course and I said, okay, I'm ready to be a GM at 24. And so they said,
Aren't we all ready to be GMs at 24? Aren't we just all ready to be GMs at 24?
Yeah. I'm a little ambitious and sometimes naive. So it's a good combination sometimes, but fearless, And so they said, why don't you go be an AGM first? Which is a very good idea, right? So they sent me down to the steakhouse to work with a great GM. I was down there for 3 months, and then a GM job opened at the bar that I had originally been a server at, and I applied for it. They gave it to me, and I crashed and burned. It was great. I was partying with the staff, favoritism on the schedule. I mean, all the shit that you don't want to do. I did it. I had no financial acumen. I had no idea what anyone was talking about in leadership meetings. It was just, I was on a wild ride. So anyway, they were getting ready to open a fine dining concept in a new building, and they had hired a GM that had worked for Danny Meyer, and I was obsessed with Danny. Setting the table was my leadership resource, and they said, do you want to go join this team as an assistant manager? And I, of course, jumped at it. They'd hired some master mixologists out of New York to build this beautiful cocktail program that nobody in the town had ever seen. This is in a smaller town in Colorado, and I was studying to become a sommelier. So it was just it was constant learning and development kind of flowing in. And I got to watch setting the table come to life when we opened that restaurant. And a lot of the team and I are still pretty tight today. And it was just magical. So again, here I am, mid-20s going, this is it. I found it. I want to do this for the rest of my life. I was traveling the world through food and wine and spirits. And it was really eye-opening for me. So I was there for about 5 years. Ended up moving to Denver and saw a job on Craigslist for a restaurant that was in the heart of downtown. It was going to open in 2 weeks. Went and interviewed with the leadership team, and we opened this beautiful Italian restaurant. It was super high volume. I was able to infuse a lot of that fine dining finesse into the style of service that we curated. And it was like one of the best. I've opened 13 restaurants, but the best opening ever. So joined that team, worked my way up as a managing partner with that group. We opened 5 different concepts in 5 years, which was a blast. So fun. Speakeasy to smokehouse, you name it. And then I decided to walk away from that partnership when we invested in a restaurant that failed. So that was my first kind of taste of failure at partial owner at 30. And then I jumped on with a with a restaurant group that had 6 locations, all the same concept in Denver, wildly successful, owned by 2 brothers. And 2 weeks after I got hired, they said, hey, private equity came in and we're going to take this thing nationally to a national level. And I went, oh, shit. What did I just get myself into? I didn't want to go down that road. I stuck it out. I knew that the brand had a lot of legs and was really successful. We grew from 6 to 48 locations in 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jesus.
So you talk about scaling. I've never seen so much tech coming at us at one time, and a lot changed, but we also maintained a lot, which was great. And needless to say, I started to burn out in that position as a regional, overseeing part of Colorado. And so I jumped on. I really was craving being back in the local space and being able to have a little bit more empowerment and autonomy in my voice again, and being able to design systems and solve problems. And so I jumped on with an ice cream company in Denver that had 6 locations, locally owned, that wanted to grow to 20. And then the pandemic hit, and I had stopped investing in myself and stopped taking care of myself and started drinking pretty heavily to cover up my unhappiness. And when I stopped and realized I needed to start working with a coach and get back to my purpose, find my purpose again in the business, that's when I realized the one-on-one work I'd always done with people and opportunities and development and growth was my favorite part of the industry. And that's when I decided to launch my coaching company.
That's awesome. That's a whirlwind. I know it's probably over 15 years, but that's a hell of a whirlwind experience to be able to pull off. I always say it's interesting jumping between independents and corporates. Like I talk to a lot of independent owners, and they're like, well, we don't love like hard systems, black and white systems, because that feels too corporate.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, there's a reason why these corporate, like when I came to Canada, because in Australia, we don't really have franchise restaurants per se. Like it's not something that, like 20 years ago when I left Australia, wasn't something we had the way that we have like a Cactus Club, a Moxie's, a Milestones, a Keg, an Earl's, like we do here in North America. And so I started working at Moxie's, and I just got open to these systems, and I'm like, this is incredible. Like I've never had everything black and white laid out exactly how it should be done, from the host to the busser to everything. And I always find the independents are always like pushing against that. They're just 100%. Like, well, no, they'll know how to do it. So at the single unit level, what separates a strong operator from someone just surviving as a leader shift to shift?
It's really as simple as, can you take a day or two off a week and fully disconnect and not get the text messages all the time? And is your team empowered enough to make great decisions so that you can actually walk away and have some sort of balance in your life with one restaurant? It's as simple as that.
And do you think though that's one of the leadership habits you need to sort of have? Because as I said in the green room, it's one of my hardest things to get through is like detaching myself. And the funny thing is, when I'm consulting for a client, I can detach myself, no problems at all. When I'm in the business, it's like, oh no, I need to do everything. But with a client, I'm like, oh no, I can tell your managers to do this and your bartenders to do that, and they'll do their thing, and I don't have to worry about it. Do you think that's one of the early like leadership habits you need to get on board? Is there any others that you kind of feel like you need to, like non-negotiables as a leader in a single unit, to make sure that you have long-term sustainable leadership?
Yeah, I mean, I think and to go back to what you just said, Shawn, I want to dive in. I would like to dive into that with you later. Let's you and I schedule some time, because I would like to coach you on that moment that you're having, because I want to understand what the difference is with your mindset in terms of how you're thinking about your clients and how you're thinking about your business. Because if we can unlock that, when you are a single unit operator, it's really important to sit down and design what your vision is for the business and what your vision is for the role, because you've got to have a target to move to and some sort of North Star to measure yourself, measure your actions and your behaviors against. So when you are a single operator and you start to feel pulled in, well, gosh, we just had a really bad Sunday shift. Maybe I should start being there on Sundays now. Instead of taking time to coach and dig and figure out what the root cause of that problem was, and use that as a moment to teach and coach the team and get better and empower them to make better decisions next time. Instead of doing that and just jumping back in, when you have a vision, you can take a second and stop and go, wait a minute, is me jumping into the business on Sundays again helping me get closer to the goal and the vision I just set for myself, or is it pulling me farther away? So that's a really, really crucial thing that I think a lot of owners start their businesses without. And because they just think about the business, all the aspects of the business, but they need to think about themselves and what life they want, what kind of lifestyle, what kind of life they want to live. And from there, once you have clarity around that, then you can start to develop the really powerful skill of boundaries. Right? No,
what
I'm
are
not
boundaries?
kidding.
Boundaries don't exist.
Your face says it all. Your face says it all, right? They're so difficult to talk about. I think a lot of people think that they're out of reach, or they just feel overwhelmed with, how do I even start to set a boundary, or how can I set a boundary and still support my team so they don't.
I think a lot of times you feel dirty about having boundary. You're like, I'm there for my team all the time, 24/7, so on and so forth. A good friend of mine always says, don't buy yourself a job. If you're going to like get into the restaurant business as an owner, don't buy yourself a job. And I coach a lot of owners as their exit strategies, and I'm like, you haven't paid yourself a salary for 5 years. Your business is not healthy. Like as a leader, it's not a business. Your business is not healthy. If you leave, your business fails, and so it's not worth anything to sell.
You know, it's funny too, because I was doing a leadership workshop last week with a group. They've got 4 locations. They're getting ready to expand rapidly. And the owner was at the leadership workshop, and we were getting really vulnerable, and we were talking about the type we were designing their leadership style. And I asked the owner what was getting in their way of being more successful and happier. And he said, I can't walk away from the business on a regular basis because I feel guilty. And I feel like I need to be there all the time because I need to be fully present and in front of my team to feel like I'm making an impact. And I stopped him and I looked at the entire room and I said, who in here would like to see this owner take more time off? And they all raised their hand. So our teams see when we're there all the time, but they don't necessarily want that for us, right? If we are going to grow, and everybody starts with a single unit, right? If you have aspirations to grow your restaurant or to have any sort of life outside of your restaurant and not be chained to it, like you said, you've got to figure out how to start trusting your people to take care of the business when you're not there. They may not do it exactly the way that you want or at the level. I hear a lot of owners say, gosh, they're not in it like I'm in it. And they don't think like owners. They never will. But they want to see you happy and living a great life, right? It's our job as leaders to make leadership look fun and look right. And I know that's easy to say. It's really, really hard to do.
Oh no, I agree. But I'm sure you do it in your leadership one-on-ones. Is that I think vulnerability and transparency with ownership and leadership in particular should be much more prevalent in the industry. Yeah. I still think that a lot of people are our age, so it's like that sort of like old school OG hospitality mentality is like you don't show your feelings. When you hit the floor, your face is smiling and all that sort of stuff, even if your lawyer just ripped you a new one because you didn't sign something or anything like that. So I think like I always sort of push for that vulnerability and transparency with leadership. Do you find that that's always a hard hurdle to get a lot of that older generation, that Gen X, millennials, sort of being much more vulnerable and transparent with their team because they feel like they need to be the pillar of strength for their whole team?
You know what? It's really interesting because I came up in that too, especially starting out at a five-star, 5-diamond resort. You left it at the door. No matter what was going on. You came in, you were in your uniform, you were crisp, you showed up, you were always happy, you made eye contact within 10 feet, you spoke to guests within 5 feet. I mean, it was just, you never said no, you were always saying yes. And so I very much came up in that, and it was difficult for me in my leadership to be vulnerable. And I'll tell you what, I didn't actually tap into it until I got out of the industry and started coaching, because then I understood how powerful it was during sessions. And I said, well, if I'm going to challenge my clients to do this, I've got to lead by example too in the way that I'm living my life and showing up in the world. And that switch has brought so many more people closer to me, has really strengthened relationships. And I'll tell you, when I do, we do one-on-one coaching, we do group coaching with restaurant owners, which is really powerful. And in these leadership workshops as well, when you create that space for people and I call it designing the alliance, set the stage for this is a safe space. This is what we want. Let's hold confidentiality in here today. Let's show up and really start talking about what's going wrong in the business and what you're struggling with, so that we can actually open doors to move forward and have progress start to happen. I have been shocked over the last 3 years of how open people are. I mean, it is not rare that we are crying in workshops because somebody has celebrated something that they didn't take time to celebrate. And they're so proud of themselves, or that somebody's burnout and they haven't said the words before, and they feel comfortable enough to say that in front of their team. And to watch people rally around them when that happens is powerful. So there's a really powerful shift happening in the business, because it is harder to run restaurants, as we know, than it ever has been before. But more and more people are open to raising their hand going, I need help, and I don't know where to get it from.
Do you think that's come out of the pandemic a lot? I feel like the pandemic did a lot of good and bad things for our industry. Obviously, during the pandemic it was horrible, but I do feel for the older generations, it's definitely opened up. Like, you need to be more open with your team. And I think the younger generation, I'm envious of the new kids coming into the industry because they know what they want. Like, I want to work 4 days a week. Like, I have a 15-year-old daughter, so I get very much that sort of new mentality, not towards us as parents, but like her friends. She's like, I don't want drama. I'm just not going to talk to you for a couple of weeks. I'm just going to cut you out of that for a bit. We're not going to talk on Snapchat. And I feel this next generation are the ones that are like, I only want to work 4 days a week. I'll work 9-hour shifts, but I want 3 days off a week. I want the money that I want, because these kids have options. And I feel like that's staff coming up and us coming down has really created this sort of like nice environment in the middle that still needs to be cracked a little bit, but I feel like it's getting better.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. But we know post-pandemic, 6 million people left the industry. And a lot of those had the institutional knowledge. And so the people that are coming in now have less experience, and it's putting so much pressure on leadership and training and every single system that you have or you don't have in your business. But yes, this next generation is coming in, and they are pros when it comes to setting boundaries, right? And I where did they learn that shit from anyway?
Yeah, I wish I could do it.
You can. It's all up here. But there's a couple different camps of operators. You know, there are a lot of people that I talk to that have been doing this for 30, 40 years. And they're like, why is this so hard at this stage of my business? Which I get. But they will say, you know, people just don't want to work these days. And then there's the other ones. I know it makes my blood boil. And then the other ones that are embracing and saying, oh my gosh, of course, like, you know exactly what you want. And this gives me the information I need to be able to know how to staff my business properly. People have forgotten that a lot of people, especially in the front of the house, got into the restaurant industry because the money was great and the hours are really flexible. You could take as much vacation time off as you want. You could say yes to as many acting gigs as you wanted to, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the ones that are so frustrated and they can't see that people want different quality of life now, and they're not willing to change. Absolutely.
As they should. We should be leaving the industry better than what we got into it.
100%.
I shouldn't be asking a 19-year-old chef to work an 18-hour day. Like, we did that 20 years ago, and it should be better now. Absolutely. And it is tougher for a lot of operators, and I completely understand. Like, I work with one of my clients he's been in the industry for 50 years. He opened his first restaurant at 23. He's 73 this year, and he's still working 40 hours a week. He loves it, and it's going to be horrible when he retires because he's not going to know what to do with himself. Yeah. But he really has empowered his whole team to like really run the place as if they are owners, and it runs miraculously with no systems, which is shocking to me because there's nothing on paper. It's just like hearsay and what you do. And I do agree with you. Post-pandemic, that sort of like late 20s to mid 30s section of the industry sort of left. And there was the older generation like us, and then the super young. So we're doing like 40 plus and then 20 something. Yeah. And there's a big gap in the middle, and that's the ones that aren't being able to train staff down.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So when you're in the leadership things, how do you pull on the thread? Because obviously you're going to have some leaders and ownership that's going to be very open with what they want and need and their mental health. And there's some that are going to be a little bit more stopped. How do you pull on that thread and like pull them out of their shell to like really allow them to open up on a leadership level?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, we very much operate from an addition mindset when we're talking to someone. You know, we want to understand if they care about their people, they want to develop their people, and if they're ready to start talking about their problems and what they're really struggling with. If they're not willing to do that work first, they're not ready for us. And that's okay. They might be in a year or 2 years or 5 years down the road, but they have to be able to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Because when we coach and we take them through our framework, we are asking really tough questions, and we are challenging their verbiage that they're using with their teams, and we are challenging their mindset. And that takes a long time to unravel. So it's really about creating space for people on a consistent basis where we can dive deeper. That's what coaching is. Helping people get a deeper level of knowledge and understanding around their leadership style and how they're running their business. So once we set that stage and create that space for them to just go deeper and deeper and deeper, they start to understand what's actually happening, because we move 1,000,000 miles an hour in this business. And there's even, yes, we may sit down operations meetings, but to actually have an owner sit and deeply strategize about, let me look back at the last 90 days of my business and see what, and celebrate what went really, really well, and talk about what the challenges are, then we can unlock what we need to do next in order for the business to grow.
So now we're taking that jump over to being a multi-unit. What's the change in identity when you go from being a single unit operator to a multi-unit operator?
I'm not a parent, but I'm sure it's got to be similar to when you have that second kid. It's this internal struggle for a lot of operators of, I've built this wonderful thing and I love my team so much at location 1, but I feel a little guilty that I'm going to spend time at location 2. How do I separate my time, support both teams, and feel like every time I'm in the restaurant, I'm making an impact? Because when you're in one location, you